All right, let's get started. Anat, why don't you get us started?
Yes. So it's a taxing day. It's probably always a taxing day under fascism, but it's tax day. And we wanted to talk about one of, if not the most important, among the most important tools that we have in our belt for confronting authoritarianism, which is various forms of economic resistance, refusal, and ridicule. And who better to tell us about that than our wonderful colleague? And I'm going to call him a friend, even though I swear he lives in Michigan and he lives in Chicago. So I'm not a very good friend. But Saqib Bhatti from ACRE. Um, can we kick off? Just tell us a little bit about you, how you came to this work, what ACRE does, and yeah, how you came into this economic justice fight. And yeah.
Yeah, I'm with ACRE, the Action Center on Race and the Economy. We are focused on working with community organizations, labor unions around the country to help sharpen folks' racial justice analysis and sharpen their corporate analysis. And in particular, thinking about how we build community labor partnerships that are actually contesting for structural power in our communities so that we actually have a fighting chance at real structural change. And so our organizing network is bargaining for the common good. We work to build community labor partnership, across the country. And how I came to this was I'm a union researcher turned nonprofit bureaucratic hack. Uh, so, um, I was a researcher at Unite here in SEIU, where I was working on corporate campaigns. And over time, around the financial crisis, it became very clear that actually, the finance sector had so much outsized power in our economy, in our democracy, in our politics, that they were it wasn't just one industry, it was actually the that controlled everything. And how that sort of changed over time is that, well, it's not just the one industry, it's also tech. And so now finance and tech have outsized power and outsized role in driving all the harms we're experiencing in our societies. And so our goal as ACRE and Bargain for the Common Good really is how do we help connect the dots between the various fights that our partner organizations are involved in, whether it's housing or climate or progressive revenue campaigns or education or healthcare. How do you connect the dots between those issues and the the corporations in the tech and finance sectors that are actually driving this harm? And in this moment, it's especially important to think about who are the techno-fascist billionaires that are actually paving the road to authoritarianism and to war and genocide, and at whose behest Trump is operating.
Yeah. It Thank you. Spot on. Sure is. So I want to start because it's tax day with the tax of it all. I'm not even sure I'll confess exactly how to ask this question, but you know, there has been a long-term right-wing project. I think it's encapsulated most memorably in the I want to make government so small I can drown it in a bathtub Grover Norquist quotation. There's been a project of making people hate the government. And it turns out it's easier to do when the government is actually just an odious regime. I mean, talk about efficiency. You do got to hand it to them. I think all of us are now in the camp of hating the present regime. So good job on that narrative project. But this tension between campaigning around taxes and people's understandable ire both at having to pay them and then honestly just like the horrific process of it all. I mean, it's just absolutely stupid the number of hours. Mike's survey joke, why do people wait until the last minute? Like, why does it take this many hours to figure out a thing that honestly they already know? Like, we don't need to be doing this stupid reconciliation. So just talk a little bit about how to use taxes and tax day as a lever for economic mobilization and ire, but without falling into the trap of becoming Grover Norquist.
Yeah, I mean,
Actually, before you get started, I want to intervene as old guy for a second, and that like the um, with respect to Grover, who is a contemporary. The original quote was not reduce the size of government so that what people know was reduce the size of the programs, et cetera, that we care about. And it's been shorthanded, right? Which is why it like now doesn't make much, it has that like Mobius strip quality that you're talking about. But at
Mm.
the beginning, it was very explicit about shrink the welfare programs and the things that help people who needed it down to that size so you could drown it.
Thank God someone is standing up for Grover. Go ahead.
No, but I think it clarifies more
Yeah, yeah.
clearly because they were very much, it happened during Reagan. I mean, he said it during Reagan, and it was at a time when they were also pushing for much higher defense expenditures and for, great, all that stuff. And so that like, it's sort of like through sloppiness lost like what the actual agenda behind the statement was.
I mean, I
Thank
think
you.
that should get very important clarification because, like, when I think about the question that Anat posed, it really is the distinction between what most people think taxes should pay for, which is the social safety net programs that should actually improve our lives, and what the right think they should be used for and what they're actually used for, which is destroying lives in overseas overwhelmingly, right? Like it's of people that look like me, and so like it's very much this thing of like we we need to like if we can actually have an alternative vision for what taxes are for, it makes it easier to fight for them. And then the other piece, of course, is just like we we only have experience with most people experience or whether or not the experience of this with the way they talk about government services is inefficient, bad quality, all those things. It's because we're we're not working with fully funded, well functioning services because they've been so starved. And so I think when we really think about like what are our levers, um, I mean, to be able to like improve services, like we need to figure out like it's a broken system. The problem isn't that taxes is where taxes are going. So at least while while we have to however long that might last, uh, there are opportunities to try to shift where that money goes, and to make it go towards the programs that we actually want, and to actually not just shift the money, but also grow the pot of money by taxing the billionaires that are not paying their fair share. I'm in Washington State right now, and I just learned that in Washington State, millionaires only pay 4% of their wealth or their income in taxes, whereas working families pay closer to 20%. And this is a pattern that's true across the country, especially in blue states like Pennsylvania. Or sorry, Pennsylvania's not blue anymore. So it swings, but Illinois, Massachusetts, places where there are you'd think they're blue states, but there's actually constitutional flat taxes.
Yeah. I just wanna put in a little messaging point because I can't help myself. So on how we talk about what the billionaires ought to be doing, one of the seemingly subtle differences, but actually it makes a big impact, is to talk about billionaires having to pay what they owe as opposed to their fair share. And the reason for that is because fair is a choose your own adventure. It's in the eye of the beholder. And some people think that a flat tax is fair because they understand it very simply as you put in a marble, I put in a marble, you put in a marble, I put in a marble. And what pay what they owe does is it implies that they're already behind. They've already made out with way too much. Whereas fair share sort of takes us to the present day and says, okay, from here on out, like, let's start putting in the kitty. Pay what they owe is, they're sitting on a bunch of money that isn't really theirs. So just a small little point. Um,
And ours
uh,
have internalized this wisdom of yours because I'm I'm older than that. And so when I was like running these campaigns, it was very much pay your fair share. And so every time I write that, I get edits back, pay what you owe.
Oh, good. So the bribes are working to the ACRE staff. I'm so glad. What an efficient use of my money. Um, uh, Mike, I'm gonna take us bigger picture unless you
Yep.
wanna stay.
No, go, go, go.
Okay. Um, so you have been working alongside a lot of fantastic human beings on a big May Day organizing. Walk us through it. What is it gonna be? Why is it gonna be? Like, how did you come to this analysis that, what needs to take place on May Day is what needs to take place, and what is it?
So on May Day, we're going to have millions of people across the country, you know, take to the streets, rally, protest, walk out from schools, skip work, um, to really shut down the economy. Right? We know that if we want to actually stop authoritarian consolidation, we need to really be building and growing our movement. And No Kings was great. At No Kings, we showed our numbers, right? 8 million people in the streets. The next escalation is May Day, where we're going to show our economic power. And so we're calling for a day of no work, no shopping on May Day. We are, on last year we had 1,400 actions on May Day. And this year we are hoping to at least double that. And to really have in major cities across the country, people really picking up the mantle from Minnesota when they did their day of no work, no school, no shopping on January 23rd, and take that model national to help really build the muscle for bigger economic disruption that is impactful and hits the billionaire oligarchs in their pocketbooks to create a cost of being fascist. Um, the starting point for May Day strong was really when Sean Fain put out the call for the UAW president, Sean Fain put out the call for a general strike in 2028. Several of us looked at that and said, that's really inspiring. And there's never been a general strike in the US. Like, in fact, in any given year, like fewer than 1% of unionized workers ever go on strike. And so, uh, the general strikes don't just happen. You don't just put out the call and like snap your fingers and people pour out into the streets. You have to actually build the muscle for acting together, for for escalated risk, for actually causing real economic disruption. And so we set a plan. Okay, what would it look like to actually have a 3.5, 4 year trajectory to May of 2028? Um, to start building those muscles. And then last year happened, and we're like 2028. Like, will this country exist in 2028? Like, will the year 2028 even take place, or will there be a nuclear holocaust before that? Unclear. And so we realized we can't wait till 2028. And so last fall, we set a goal for doing 30 solidarity schools uh, ahead of May Day. And we're on track to hit that goal. We've now expanded to say we want 100 by Labor Day. Um, we're actually just like really in cities across the country working with folks to train them on what does it look like to actually take people out and do real economic disruption, both union and non-union workers, because we know that at the end of the day, if you want to have a general strike or anything resembling that, um, you can't do it with unionized workers alone, because unionized workers are a small drop in the bucket of the American workforce. And so we know this has to be bigger than just unions. Um, and then really what we have an eye towards is we know that uh, we know that Trump is planning on stealing the election. We know that the plans are already underway with the voter repression, with the gerrymandering, with various other things. And we know that Trump is not beyond another January 6th. And so we want to be ready for that moment and be ready to shut down uh, at least 20 cities across the country in the event of something egregious like a stolen election or the deployment of nuclear weapons or, in the invocation of the Insurrection Act to deploy military to our cities. We want to be ready for those moments. And so we see May Day and then Labor Day after this as structure tests that are actually helping us build the muscles and and inspire others to join in so that we can be ready to do what needs to be done when Trump goes nuclear.
Um, so I'm going to unpack part of the general strike idea and uh, um, pose also a couple of questions off of that. I think that my experience of people who are eager for a general strike or think about general strikes think of it as a way to hold the regime accountable. That it's and that I think is a problem. I think that when you're talking about what has to be built before there's a general strike, there's a key piece of education that's almost completely missing in this country, which is that in the United States, unlike in other countries, and I'll come back to that in a second, the object of the general strike is the capitalist class, not the government itself. And as we saw in a sort of mini version in Minnesota, where there was something like a general strike in a reaction to ICE, what mattered and what also shows the overall weakness is that many companies were on the side of the strikers. At the same time, they were continuing to make huge donations to the Republicans and to Trump, right? And so we allow them to be invisible in providing what will essentially be at least $3 billion towards keeping this regime in power, right? And think that by just simply, like, even if we were twice as many people at No Kings, as long as we're just focused on Trump, it still won't matter, right? And I think when people hear you say we have to build these muscles, all of that, they hear it just in terms of sort of mechanical. We got to figure out how to be marshals. We got to figure out how to de-escalate, like in these tactical things. But the real gap in the United States that's missing is understanding who the actual target of the general strike is. And part of the reason, in addition to the fact that we have overwhelmingly corporate media who like won't let us see that, and this is really important in terms of Hungary or like Egypt and Tahrir Square and all of that. We are a plutocracy, right? Those countries have histories where the actual center of power is the state, like in the Soviet Union, then Russia, or in a lot, or Egypt, right, where it's the state slash military, and therefore there's an alignment between who people were going out on strike and the target. And so it'd be great if you can, to just sort of really elaborate for people why this isn't like the gap we're in is not just figuring out how to be marshals or how to convince people to go out and not show up for work.
100%. Like, we would, uh, the tagline for, made as strong as workers over billionaires, or that's the hashtag, or whatever you want to call it. But very much about how do we actually understand who are the billionaire oligarchs that whose agenda Trump is carrying, whether he knows it or not. Right? There's this thing, that like Palantir, what they're trying to do is basically, uh, you know, take over the controls of the government, the levers of control, so that even when Trump is long gone, they actually control what happens based on their algorithms, right? That they can control benefits administration, they can control surveillance, various other things. Um, and so we're very much like when we talk about building the muscles, it is a big part of that's having the analysis of who are the corporations that are actually driving the harm that we're seeing and how do we force them to pay a price, right? Like we're saying we want to drive up the cost of fascism to the fascist enablers. And
Right.
yeah, and so some of that is also then figuring out how do we move beyond just big mobilizations to more disruptive mobilizations with smaller groups of people. Like when we talk about what happened in Minnesota on January 23rd, the big day of no work, no school, no shopping, with more than 75,000 people pouring into the streets. That was coming on the tail end of a week of action where they hit up corporate targets like Hilton, Delta, Home Depot, Target throughout the week with smaller groups of people. Um, there was a group of clergy with Isaiah that took a rest at Target's offices. And so we need to figure out how we're actually building the capacity for both the big mobilizations and smaller, more escalated mobilizations that are taking greater risk in order to be able to build both muscles simultaneously and have real economic impact.
Can I piggyback a question?
Yeah.
Um, so, to Mike's point, the 3 billion that he referenced, just in case it wasn't clear, that's the estimated money that corporations will be pouring into Republican campaigns
And billionaires. That
and billionaires. Yeah,
there
sorry,
more of the money actually now comes from individual
from
billionaires.
individuals. So that was campaign contributions in the midterms, in case that
Yeah.
for folks listening, if that thread didn't come through. I think that sort of begs the question, and I'm going to pile on. I was having conversations with organizers, which we'll come back to at the end, around closing the concentration camps. And one of the key things that we did in Australia, which is, my evergreen reference point, because we did close the prison camps, um, asterisk complexity, but most of them in whatever, no perfect victory, um, was a sort of side campaign called No Business in Abuse. And the No Business in Abuse was targeting corporations that were, a lot of them financial, that were financing the building of these things, the running of these things, but then also suppliers, like people bringing food, like whatever the giant, I can't remember the name, the giant trucks that bring food to like schools and do school lunches and do lots of like large corporate, let's call it food, sort of things. And so this sort of begs the question, because of course, like none of the expansions of these concentration camps will be possible without loans, like all of the financial institutions and then, pension funds that hold Civic Corps and other prison corporations in their kind of portfolio. That's a thing people could be doing. They could be telling, I'm taking a wild guess here, Bank of America, JP Morgan Chase. I haven't looked it up, but I'm gonna take a guess that they're giving out money here because I feel like they reliably are. Um, Not to give money to these projects. So that comes back to the evergreen question of demands. The Minnesota action, which I think they called a day of reflection and action, day of reflection and something else. Boy,
Boy,
is
if
my
that's not Minnesota nice.
um their demand was ice out, right? So talk to us about the demand attached to May Day, which is more complicated because it's national and it's this and that.
Yeah, I mean, so talk about the demand on May Day, but I actually want to also go back to we were talking about earlier about the banks and the financing because that's a thing I've been wanting to talk to you about, and we can do it here. But the demands for May Day, we have three big demands. The first one is tax the billionaires to protect our community, so we can fund our communities. The second one is no ICE, no war, no private armies for authoritarianism, and the third one is rein in corporate power and protect democracy. And so sort of three big, big picture goals. I'm now wondering, like with you here, I'm like, are these the right messages? And and while I have our comms person sending me signal messages right now, I'm like, oh, you should talk. Yeah, so those are the demands that we're really sort of mobilizing for on May Day, and we're really trying. Of course, we want to fight for all the things. And we think these are the three places where there's been the greatest sort of overreach from the administration, and where that really directly speak to the the pain that communities are feeling most, that the broadest group of people are facing. Um, on your previous piece, so this is interesting. So I've been wanting to talk to you about this because, uh, I've been thinking about this issue of targets and corporate targets in particular. Um, and like, I think where our mind immediately goes, the people, the players that stand out as like bad actors that you can like get people like, pissed off about. One is like the Palantirs of the world who are like, they are driving what's happening. They have a lot of power in the Trump regime. They actually, like if you could actually beat them, you could actually like have really big impact, but it's actually really hard to beat them because ideologically they're completely aligned with Trump, and they have so much money that they're impenetrable in many ways. Um, and then on the other end, you have targets like Target, Home Depot, Enterprise that are much more accessible. They have locations everywhere. They they're not ideologically invested in the fascist project, so theoretically they're movable. But they don't have structural power. You can move them, you can get defections, and that helps give you momentum. But like, if Hilton stops housing, uh, ICE agents, like, well, like, hire
Marriott will, or
exactly.
yeah,
Um, and so, who are the targets that actually are accessible? Like, they have locations everywhere. They actually have, they're vulnerable to consumer pressure, and they have real structural power. It's the banks,
yeah,
right? Have a demand on the banks to say, like what you could around ICE, it could be like, yeah, no money to finance anyone, uh, any corporation or government agency that cooperates with ICE, or n- or if you think about a stolen election, like no money for anyone that takes part uh, in define it. That you could basically put enough pressure on the banks to basically do a capital strike from the fascists, like that's actually like extremely powerful. The challenge is well, to see why, like the banks have the most latent power that is probably with levers that you can move, but they're not the most obvious targets because
mhm,
it's not what they're doing. It's that they could do something to stop to stop fascism in its tracks. It's not that they're, although in some cases, I mean, like B of A, Bank of America is again financing core civic and private prisons, so it is also what they're doing. But beyond that, the real power is like what they could do that they're not currently doing.
yeah. Mike, I have lots of reactions, but do you wanna weigh in
No,
first?
go for it.
Yeah, I think on the specific since we're workshopping live, I'm sure your staff loves you. I just wanna go on record as saying it wasn't my idea to workshop live, so, please don't direct your ire at me. Um, I think the challenge with those 3 extraordinary demands is that they're hard to remember, they're hard to repeat, they're just a lot. And I agree with every single one of them, but, like, you said them, I didn't write them down, I can't repeat them back to you. And maybe if I heard them twice more, I could, not sure, that may be my son likes to tell me, "That's an ish you, not an ish me." So this may be, in fact, an ish you, not an ish me, but
No,
an ish actually, the other way. To me, the encapsulation, the crystallization of what you're saying, and I realize it doesn't encompass all of it, so I'm saying that, that's what happens when you do a simplification, is no funding for fascism, which can cheekily be said as no money for murder and no payouts for pedophiles. Those are 3 phrases still, but they mean the exact same thing, and different people, some people aren't gonna say no payouts for pedophiles, but some people are. And that brings in the whole Epstein class of it all and, a even further layer of, I guess I'll speak softly and say repugnancy because that's like the least strong word I can say about how horrific it is. I think the no funding for fascism, and I'm going to come to your like the banks, it's less obvious, but it's perhaps more consequential. what Mike brought in is that they're literally funding these midterm campaigns, right? And, it may not be like Jamie Dimon himself. Like, I don't know. I haven't checked his giving recently. But it's actually enabling them to come into power, and it is propping them up or conversely refusing to check them. And so I think this idea of no funding for fascism, which does, I admit, leave out the pay your fucking taxes assholes. I get that it leaves that out, and that's a problem. But it's sort of like that's the tension. And I work closely with Minnesota as well. And so in hearing them sort of reckon and wrestle with what are they saying about their January 23rd thing and crystallizing upon ICE out, help us demand ICE out. They also recognize that's not the whole shebang, but they wanted a thing that was like clear and measurable. Did it happen? Didn't it happen? And I think something like no funding for fascism, also expressed as no money for murder, no payouts for pedophiles, you can put like concrete conditions on that. Like you will not donate to their midterm,
Mhm.
you're not going to put cash in their midterm coffers. You are not going to finance the concentration camp project. You're not going to continue to provide intelligence and whatever the hell Palantir does, which I don't pretend to fully understand. Uh, because with a demand, what you want is for it to have a memorable quality, a repeatable quality, but also kind of an edginess where people could gauge, yes, they did, no, they didn't.
Yeah. Also, before you go on, I just want to respond to a text that I got again, this one. When you see me turning away, it's because we have people who are feeding potential questions from your stack. It's not because I'm ignoring, or it not being impolite. It's just there's like no way to look at the list of questions you're submitting and keep my eye focused forward from my camera. But go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I'm throwing out at you.
No, that's super helpful and super compelling. And I have to say, your like ability to like rattle off alliterative phrases is uncanny.
It's kind of like what I do for a living.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't have any other talents, so this is it. Unless you count fashion as a talent, then I have that. Should we go to questions and I will take the hit from the crowd of looking away? Um, it's very funny that you're taking the hit for this. I love it. I am looking at the questions,
Yeah.
audience. Um, okay. First question. How are tech bros benefiting from the Israeli-American war on Iran and the Israeli war on Lebanon other than platform software?
I mean, tech bros are uh, m- they are the new defense contractors, right? Like the uh, it's data from folks like Palantir, Anthropic. It it is what powers decision making for like letting Israel know which buildings to bomb in Gaza or Lebanon, letting the U.S. know which buildings to bomb in Iran. Just like it lets ICE agents know where to go to kidnap people. They like and now you said that like you don't really know what Palantir does. The way I describe their business model is it's data mining for evil. Uh, they are they're using all of our data against us in order to get big defense contracts, create surveillance states that they control, um, and uh, and yeah, they're literally the ones that decide which who lives and who dies in American Israeli wars.
Yeah, I also to take the Palantir thing further, um, uh, the which is not as catchy, but like is the but I think makes a really important point again in this context of like where we are now and sort of like the building of evil over time. the thing, all the stuff Palantir is doing is based on the development of counterinsurgency strategies for American forces overseas in Iraq and Afghanistan and other places we don't even hear about. And like some of you may, although maybe too long ago, heard about David Petraeus and like the new protocol for counterinsurgency control. And at the center of one of the pillars of it is total situational awareness. And the idea that an important part of containing and repressing counterinsurgency is having that as much information that can be processed to really keep control of the population and as part of like the surveillance state. And I think one of the problems, that Americans keep making over and over again is to really not pay attention, or even if they do, not care when these things get beta tested overseas with the idea that it'll never come home, right? But what we're seeing is really like what they figured out in Fallujah or what they figured out in other parts of the world coming home now refined. And that's what Palantir, that's what it isn't superficial, like they just showed up and said, like, here are some services. We're at the end of a pipeline that we let fill over the last 20 or more years.
Yeah. M
And
Mike, sorry, go ahead.
one thing I'd add to that is it's interesting. A few weeks ago, when Anthropic was in the news for standing up to the Department of Defense. Uh, and just to be clear, like with their the standing up, like, oh, we're the ethical AI. It's like they their fight with the Department of Defense was whether they could keep contracting with the Department of Defense, because they do, right? It's that the lines they were drawing was, well, we don't want fully autonomous weapons. We don't want to be able, like, they're okay with semi-autonomous weapons. They're okay with, providing data that describes that helps decide where things, who gets bombed and who doesn't. But they just don't want, fully autonomous weapons. It was just like some of the stuff that they were talking about in terms of like what are the lines, that these are bright lines that us apart, were about the degree to which they will kill people. It was not about whether they will kill people.
Yeah. Mike, do you wanna pick the next question, or should I?
Actually, I want to actually add on to the onto that because I think it's really important in terms, like in even broader terms, about the way in which people are talking about the um, the the war crimes going on right now in Iran and around the world, right? And I hope like there no one about to snip what I say to put it out of context, right? There's a way in which, let's say during World War II, in an anthropic, like in that the construct that Anthropic's talking about, having like a more efficient way to identify Nazi targets and train lines to concentration camps that were supervised by humans would be a better alternative than one that wasn't. But it now like is falling into the problem of what happens when they say this is going too far, right? Which would be it's going too far to let it be automated, is we're no longer talking about the fact that this is an illegal aggression, right? And and that and we keep like getting punked that way, right? Some of you may have seen Carolyn Levitt get asked by a reporter about how when George Bush was thinking, but before they went into Iraq, doing a statement saying, our problem isn't with you, the people of Iraq, our problem is with the government of Iraq, right? And like that, like gets all sorts of plus ones and like speaking truth to power and all of that. And we're not noticing that we've just made that illegal aggression okay, right? And that's like, I think, really important here. So, yeah, I mean, as military technology evolves, in the rare cases where we have to fight, like, that's a different story, but you can't go to you can't make the conversation about how much human supervision of war crimes there is without talking about war crimes first.
Yeah. Um, I'll pick the next question unless you wanna.
Yeah, no, go for it.
All right. Uh, this is a fun one. Um, I didn't write these questions. When Dems
Not
support,
alliterate
huh?
They don't have alliteration, so it's
They don't
obvious.
have alliteration. We got AI to do it. When Dems support billionaires, what do we do?
We got make the billionaires toxic and uh, really we need to expose the fact that Dems are actually supporting billionaires, right? And that it's not just like, and that's one of the key things with workers over billionaires. It's not just a Republican or Democrat issue. The truth is that both parties have been, how do you how do you say that word?
Kowtowing.
Kowtowing.
Kowtowing. Both parties have been kowtowing to billionaires, and that's why we're experiencing. That's actually directly lead to the rise of fascism because what's happening is while people are very much experiencing deep pain in their lives, the Democrats are saying, "Well, like the economy is great, don't worry about it," and Republicans are saying, "Well, like." Yeah, things are bad. It's because of those folks over there. So go kill those folks. Go abduct those folks. And like I think that's one of the key things is that like we need to figure out how we're actually building a real people powered movement that is forcing our elected officials, Democrats and Republicans, to choose a side. Are you on the side of the billionaires or are you on the side of workers? And that's what we're really aiming to do on May Day is to and Mayday and beyond is to really start building that movement and making the billionaire oligarchs uh, themselves have a direct cost as well, right? And so when we talk about having demands on what the billionaires should do, a big part of that is that helps clarify these are the folks that are responsible for the crisis that we're feeling, and then we can really like polarize, use it as a wedge issue with elected officials. Which side are you on? Are you going to stand with the billionaires or with our communities?
Yeah. Um, Question, have these kinds of actions, boycotts, been successful in other countries? How do you measure effectiveness? I think all of us probably have examples from other countries, but do you want to start that off?
Sure. I mean, the example that immediately comes to mind is apartheid South Africa, right? Like the the boycott divestment movement there was so impactful and actually put in the economic pressure to force the fall off the apartheid regime. And I think, frankly, and this is again like similar to what you said, Mike. Don't want to be quoted out of context here, but like. Uh, I mean, Iran is sort of giving a lesson in corporate campaigning right now because they're using economic leverage with the Strait of Hormuz to actually force concessions from the United States, right? And so I think like this thing of when we think about economic choke points and the fact that if you apply pressure on economic choke points, you can actually uh, you can force the power structure to bend to your will because actually they're dependent on these systems where we're all complicit in order to make it happen. And so if we withhold our economic activity, if we hold it through boycotts or through just shutting down, uh, you know, uh, central business districts or various other things, that can go a long way towards creating real costs for these corporations that are helping drive the billionaire agenda.
I can go next. The Montgomery bus boycott. Don't even have to go abroad, just have to go into the past. And I think probably everybody listening knows, but that was in to echo your words, that was creating an economic choke point. You had a set of reliable passengers that this transit system relied upon for financing in order to be able to pay drivers and upkeep vehicles and pay for fuel and so on. And those passengers at extraordinary hardship to themselves. And I think that that's something that we often gloss over and don't think about or forget or kind of don't internalize, but at great hardship to themselves. And for a long time, you know, sometimes we would like to order our revolution on Amazon, pun very much intended, and have next day Prime. And like Amazon's not going to deliver the revolution in every possible way. They are not going to. In fact, they're in the opposite business. Um, uh, Cue that like nauseating Lorraine Sanchez Bezos profile, which like extraordinary. If you haven't subjected yourself to it, but at extraordinary cost to themselves through really tight bonded networks, carpooling, using bicycles, using the limited cars that existed within the community, because people still had to get to work, people still had to get to childcare, people still had to get to where they needed to go. And that was enough to force the bus companies to have to come to the table and to reconsider their proposal. And it extended, as we all know, well beyond that one town in Montgomery. It helped catalyze and spark a law that meant that you could no longer do that form of segregation. Another example, and then I'll kick it to you, Mike, fair warning,
Yeah.
is uh, ACT UP famously breaking into the New York Stock Exchange and standing where they ring that bell, hanging a banner that said "Sell Burroughs Welcome." Burroughs Welcome is the name of the corporation that was manufacturing AZT, and not making it available to people who were dying rapidly and horrifically from this relatively new disease. And basically socking it straight to Wall Street and then doing a die-in. I think that's a pretty like strident example, a pretty like in your face example from our own slightly more recent history.
Yeah. So first of all, I want to caution people that if you are planning to go on to Amazon to order your revolution, that their their version is going to be upranked and ours will be on page 2 or 3 if you're looking. And so don't get fooled by going to the top ranked revolution there. But I want to take a more, but a different kind of example of the success that we need. Um, and again, do the old guy thing. For me personally, there's a way in which the beginning with the wars in Iran and Afghanistan and it's really extending into, Afghanistan and Iraq and extending now into Iran. The, the, um, yeah, uh, the use of American military force as the first option um, was what it was up until like 1975. And we have this really like remarkable period from around 1975 until um, the the 21st century. Again, don't like clip this in a way that's problematic because like what happened for that quarter century was really shitty too. But like there was a big gap from like wiping out Vietnam and killing literally millions of people and picking that habit up again in the 21st century. That was very much the product of all the anti-war organizing and disruption that happened in the 1960s and early 1970s that created a different calculus. And on the out of context part, obviously, like the Reagan involvement with the Contras and all of that stuff was really horrible. Um, and like that was a problem too. But the way in which there was just the default to the license that, hey, we don't like a thing, so we're just going to like bomb the shit out of people and not care. Like that actually bought 25 years of the national establishment being too worried about reprising the 60s and early 70s. And it really, I mean, I hope this will change, but it's really sad that the same kind of backlash is really yet to form here, which again is not to take anything away from people who are in a very lonely place for the last 25 years in the peace movement here. But I think that's really important is that this actually, we can't, this is being done in our names, and it's not enough to kind of answer a survey and say, you know, I don't approve of it, or to not retch at Democrats who are being savvy and saying, like, he's not doing anything about egg prices because, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, I'm gonna leave off with this question, which I'm also happy to take a crack at. But I'm gonna let you have the first crack. I can still hear my friends thinking a strike sounds too vague and unfocused. How do we strike against big billionaires and government at the same time? Specific messaging to convince people.
I mean, so we are, so on May Day, what we're calling for is no work, no school, no shopping. We're not using the word strike
Yep.
uh, for various reasons. Um, what we're trying to do at this point is show our power, right? We want to show that this is the disruption that we can cause. Um, we're not like no work, no school, no shopping is not focused enough to have impact on one particular target. It is actually just like we're flexing our muscles, show here's what we can do uh, uh, when we need to, and we're actually building the muscles to grow bigger over time. And so this is very much, like I said, like in the vein of like building our muscles so that we can be ready for bigger, more powerful, more disruptive action against the right targets when the time comes. Yeah.
Yeah. What I would add on to that is that, and this is me assuming within the context of the question, because you said I can still hear my friends, that you have the luxury of not doing broadcast communication, which is where we have to message it's to everyone because we're going to make an ad or because we're going to put it on a website, but rather you're able to have an actual conversation with a human being or a set of human beings, which makes things nice and sort of involves a different form of communication than maybe what you would see off of a website. What I would say, if I was actually talking to people, is I would say, look, the reality of this is that we have an economic problem that masquerades as a purely political one. We understand this regime to be hurting people, abducting them, whatever these friends already believe and feel, like you pick that one that they're the most upset about ICE, or they're the most upset about the stealing of all of our money and, the slashing of healthcare, or they're the most upset about Iran or some combo. You name that thing. And you say the only reason that's possible, the only reason they could come into power and remain in power is because a whole set of billionaires that purchased themselves politicians. And they've been purchasing themselves politicians full scope, not just one side or the other, for a while now. And unless and until we actually get at the root of this problem, which is that there is way too much money that we, the working people of this country, bring into being in way too few hands, this cycle is never going to break. And so what we have to do is we have to put these billionaires on blast. We have to make them understand that we are prepared to shut them down and to shut off their toxic, horrific fuel supply, which is money, because the many can take on the money. We've done it before and we've won, and we're doing it again. That's what I would say if I had the luxury of more time and conversation. Um, Tell us again. I want to close with a specific immigrant rights call to action, but the most important thing, May Day, we'll re-up the link, tell people where to go, tell people what to do.
Yes. So you should go to maydaystrong.org, maydaystrong.org. You can sign our pledge of no work, no school, no shopping. You can find, there's a map there that'll show you actions near you. If there isn't one near you, you can actually sign up to host one. We have a host toolkit that'll walk you through the steps, make it very easy. Yes, like so that's really your hub for all of it is madeitstrong.org. Pledge, host an action, find an action toolkit. It's all there.
Compete with other people to tell more people. Um, Mike, before I do the closing call to action, any
Yeah.
famous last words?
No, I think this is great. It's really great to have you on this tax day. And yeah, let's like make May Day matter.
So as we are fighting on all the fronts all the time, April 25th, Detention Watch Network is doing a big action around all the detention centers. You can go to Detention Watch Network and see more. And then the new thing that I want to lift up is there is a group of badass Texas moms who are organizing two different things. The first is happening on April 16th. So, like tomorrow, which is that they're asking fellow moms to go online, so if you have Instagram, if you have TikTok, if you have whatever the other things are, and to read out loud one of the letters from the children in Dilley. They have a toolkit. It is the easiest thing on earth. They have walked you through every possible thing you can do. The letters are there. The how you get on Instagram is there. You do not need to know anything. If you've never gone live, this is your chance. This is your moment. So that's tomorrow. And that is building up to April 18th, where they are doing a minivan caravan of moms leaving from various Texas towns and driving to the Dilley concentration camp. Yeah, we got to close this shit down. Like this, we gotta close this shit down. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jen, for sharing the website. It just got put into the chat. And thank you so much for joining us and for all of the extraordinary work that you do.
This is great to be for this. Yeah.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.